Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
I'm Sylvia Earle, National Geographic explorer, founder of Mission Blue, and I'm an ocean elder. Thank you, ocean elders, for sponsoring this program.
And this is our program, Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations with the ocean community on topics of wonder and interest. We're really glad to be back, and we hope everyone has made some time to get out of the doors. You can put questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can towards the end of the program. And we'll also be adding some links in the chat box for your information. And as we get started today, let's remind everyone that the world
Is
blue. Today, we are so happy to be talking with Rene Ebersole. She's editor-in-chief and co-founder of WIRE, the Wildlife Investigative Reporters and Editors, a nonprofit dedicated to exposing wildlife crime and exploitation of nature. Welcome, Rene.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor to be here.
I am going to attempt to share my screen. And we'll get some of your slides up here.
This is the best part of diving.
It is sharing the screen. Ah, look at all this garbage up here. What did get out of there? Get out of there. Oh my God. Oh, here we go. Play from the start.
She can build submarines.
Excellent. Well, we really are so grateful for you for joining us and talk about this incredible body of work that you've undertaken. And as Sylvia often says, without knowing, how can we care? And with knowing comes caring. It's really impressive work that you've been doing on this huge effort to expose environmental crime where it exists, which seems to be everywhere these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pressure on the wildlife.
So you've helped fill the knowledge gap in so many areas. I guess one of the big ones has been with the bushmeat trade and honeybee theft, and then of course social media's impact on the wildlife trafficking.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening online, right out in the open. Doesn't even take a lot of investigating to expose it because it's happening underneath your nose. And I think you'll probably agree that WIRE's journalism is parallel to ocean exploration and conservation. You already alluded to that, Liz, because if there's no one to shine a spotlight on the darkness, no one will know it exists there, right?
Most humans do not think of ocean life as wildlife.
It's true.
Even freshwater, you have fish and wildlife agencies, as if fish are somehow different. They're wildlife. And we treat them as if they're products, free for taking by anybody.
And so much of what we work on at WIRE is about the commodification of wildlife, marine and terrestrial. And it is amazing to see how much people talk about animals as products.
They really do. And I mean, this beautiful little pangolin that this fellow's carrying here, it's like the most trafficked animal in the world, I think, at this point.
Yeah, the most trafficked mammal for sure.
Mammal, yeah. And they're just such cool animals. And, to think that they've evolved to this incredible adaptation to their environment, and yet they're trafficked largely for their scales.
Yeah.
And their meat, which is just unreal.
Disgusting. I mean, people should think of that really as a terrible thing.
I think your average person doesn't know what a pangolin is, though, right? Like,
I know.
They're so cute.
They really are. And they have a place in the greater scheme of things, cuteness or not.
Yeah.
We should value who they are and what they do. Just respect them, leave them alone.
And protect this comes into the whole, 30 by 30 conversation. We've got to protect the habitat, both on the land and in the sea for these really iconic animals and everything that exists around them to persist.
Oh, look at that face.
The sloth. I just saw, there's a recent article about this so-called sloth world down in Florida, and almost all of the sloths that they brought in to have on display for people to interact with perished before the place even opened. And it was just a horrendous uh, thing to go on. But tell us about the sloth cartel kingpin.
Yeah, I mean, those animals that died, unfortunately, many of them were poached from the wild. They weren't brought in legally, and this, it often starts with something online. Someone sees something they like online, and whether it's a performing parrot or a sweet sloth or capybaras have made a
Wow.
big splash on social media recently. And then all of a sudden, it's like the Harry Potter effect too. Remember when snowy owls from Harry Potter,
Oh, yeah.
everybody loves snowy owls, and all of a sudden, snowy owl trafficking was happening. So sloth encounters are a big deal. Increasingly, people love to spend time with them. I guess it's like the our hemisphere's koala, right? Like
Mm,
in Australia, people hug a koala. They kind of have that same attraction, I think. But yeah, it's really sad. And they have very specific care requirements.
mhm.
So if they're not treated well in captivity, they tend not to make it very long. And this
Yeah.
was an egregious example, the sloth
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. It's just horrendous.
Well, there's so
Yeah.
many creatures that are taken from the wild have special food habits. They
Hmm.
have special places where they live, hard to replicate. Some zoos are getting really good at thinking like the creatures that they keep.
Hmm.
Many
Yeah,
still reflect the ways that where zoos started, and animals were not really treated with dignity or respect.
and there are zoos that are involved with conservation work, but then there are zoos that are like more like roadside facilities. And there are a lot
Hmm.
of zoos like or yet rescues sort of masquerading as zoos and rescues that are actually involved in trafficking wildlife. Last
Correct.
year I was in the Middle East and I visited several private zoos where
Wow.
I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw a baby chimpanzee just roaming around the middle of the zoo. I saw a full-grown orangutan at another zoo, just out with people.
Wow.
Um, it was an awful situation for the animal who was being touched and molested by all these tourists, and it was unsafe for the tourists.
Yeah. They're powerful animals. They get,
Yeah,
they really get upset. They can let you know about it.
they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything quite as bad as that at a zoo. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of roadside attractions that are not behaving ethically.
Yeah. No, it's really a shame. And it does extend into, we've seen it, even I know in some sort of private zoos, they've even had things like a manatee or a dolphin. It's just
Yeah.
wild that they bring these aquatic mammals into captivity as well.
So
But
what
it,
sloth cartel kingpin? Who, looking at the headline on your image here,
So did
who
you
is it?
find him?
I didn't do this story. I
Oh,
didn't,
okay.
I didn't, we didn't report this story. This was one that recently came out.
Okay.
Actually, no, this one was from National Geographic quite a while ago. Would you like me to tell you Wire's origin story? I think the
Next
next
slide.
slide will tell you, we'll talk a little bit about a kingpin.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so our roots go all the way back to around 2010 when our editorial director, Ollie Payne, was working as features editor at National Geographic, and he commissioned a reporter named Brian Christie to write an investigation on the Lizard King, Anson
Mm.
Wong. And Wong was one of the most notorious wildlife traffickers in the world at the time. He smuggled Komodo dragons, plowshare tortoises, and the horns of Sumatran rhinos.
Mm.
He said, "Nothing can be done to me." He said he could sell a panda without consequences.
Wow.
And that story ran in the January 2010 issue of National Geographic. And subsequent media exposure helped ensure that Wong's conviction, he was convicted.
Good.
And then wildlife trafficking became news in Malaysia and Thailand and Singapore. And Malaysia actually passed its first new wildlife law in 50 years as a result of that coverage. So
That's
that was
excellent.
the beginning of wildlife, like sort of, long form investigative coverage with unflinching photography at National Geographic. And it evolved into more stories that had also had large scale impact, including one on the Catholic Church using, it was a pedophile Monsignor who was using uh, ivory from the Philippines. And that prompted the Vatican to address the use of religious objects made from carved ivory. And there was another one where they put a GPS into a fake tusk, an elephant tusk, and demonstrated how it moved from Africa to Asia. And it was the funding from that ivory was going to Joseph Kony's LRA. Um, so these stories sort of like started percolating up at the Geographic, and a new program was started called Wildlife Watch, and that's how I got involved with National Geographic about, I think it was around 2016 was the first story that I wrote for Wildlife Watch for National Geographic.
What's the story about this poor bear?
So yeah, this is Asia's wildlife trade. This bear, I believe he was part of the bear bile. Yeah, you can see it.
Beer, but yeah, he's hooked
Bear
up on the,
bile. They're
yeah, beer
removing
bile.
his bile, so they sedate them and then they remove this bile. And it's just one of the, long laundry list of things that go to Asia for traditional Asian medicine.
And you've got some other ones here. So here's kind of a showcase of some of these, the
Mm.
ivory that we were just
Hmm.
talking about too.
Yeah, yeah. These are two of the stories, the hidden GPS chip and the Catholic Church expose.
Hmm. And then, oh, the poor rhinos.
I
So,
know this is a tough one, but it was
yeah.
such an important story. This was a rhino horn trafficking story, and it brought great public attention and pressure to this network of corrupt South African rhino breeders.
Hmm.
Um, and it resulted in this image from Brent Sturton winning. He won Wildlife Photographer of the Year for this image, which is the most prestigious award in wildlife photography. And because of that, these contests really can bring a lot of notoriety and attention. And this photograph was published in dozens of magazines afterwards, bringing a lot of global attention to rhino poaching. It was a really important image.
Incredible. It's just so grim.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's very sad.
But it's, it really points to, I think, a important thing. You're alluding to it earlier that there's so many of these sort of really nefarious things that all link together.
Hmm.
But the wildlife element, it the sort of the penalties are almost negligible compared to sort of arms trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking. Um, so it seems that these things really are kind of a driver economically for a lot of these other, or they sort of weave together in some really crazy ways.
They do. Sometimes it's the same networks. And as you said, yeah, it's like the top four is drugs, humans, and guns, and then wildlife. But the thing about wildlife trafficking is the penalties for wildlife trafficking are much, much lower. So
Mhm.
it's high reward, low risk. I mean, if you've
Exactly.
been if you're working with the cartel and you get caught trafficking drugs or guns, you might go to prison for 20 years.
Mhm.
Whereas a wildlife trafficker, they could get away with just a fine, and then it's the cost of doing business.
Right, right. So it's, how do you think they could sort of bring more equity to the fines or the prison terms for the wildlife side?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I don't know how you get more um, steeper penalties. I guess more attention, hopefully, increasing attention about that can help in
Yeah.
make the case that there needs to be stronger penalties, and people valuing wildlife and biodiversity more. I think through great photography and great filmmaking helps people really develop a love of if they don't get outside enough, hopefully those things can add to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Well,
think the penalties should be stronger.
often as in the drug trafficking, the people who get caught are not always the ones who are really the most to blame. And the
That's such an important point, Sylvia. Yeah, like the people who are poaching the wildlife, a lot of times they're just trying to make a living. It's just, collecting whatever animal it is, whether it's a sea creature or a parrot or a chimpanzee. It's one more way that they can feed their family or send their kids to school. Like in Africa, that's like top priority, sending my kids to school.
Mhm.
And, it's the demand that's the problem. It's the demand and the middlemen who take advantage of, the small guy who needs to make a living and, just capitalizing on the commodity.
Yeah, it's just another form of exploitation, really.
of the
Hmm.
people as well as the wildlife. It-
Exactly.
This is especially true. Well, it's also true with industrial fishing.
Mhm.
And it's not just the illegal, it's actually the legal fishing that is condoned and even supported with subsidies. But the money really goes to those who own the businesses, not to the people who are out there actually doing the catching.
Right.
Yeah.
And that too is connected, as Ian Urbina, who's appeared with us a couple of times, the human trafficking, the dark side of industrial fishing, legal as well as illegal, employing people who are essentially slaves. They
Yeah.
Exactly.
lose their identity and are captives for long periods of time, sometimes
Years.
forever, until they
Yeah.
die.
Yeah. It's horrific. I've read a lot of that coverage and it's just so upsetting.
All right. So people need to know that when they buy wild fish, when they tolerate the kind of zoo behavior that is misbehavior, tolerating this is part of the problem. You need
Hmm.
to turn away or make choices eating tuna or other ocean wildlife that really, if the market goes away, so does the problem. I think Wild Aid has really a motto: when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Yeah.
The trade is powered by people and the
Hmm.
choices that all of us make. If we just understand that creatures that are part of this wildlife trade preceded humans, in some cases by, like sharks, hundreds of millions of years. They've never known a predator such as humans. We're relentless. And with modern technology that cuts both ways, helpful with new technologies, we can know the problems. We can see what's there to be seen. But technology that makes it possible to find, capture, and market ocean wildlife, terrestrial wildlife, to find a way to take that natural fabric of life that all of us need because it makes Earth habitable. We don't make Earth habitable. Our actions are working in quite the other way, undermining these tightly knit systems that give us the air we breathe, shape the temperature of the planet, chemistry, all the things that we happily take for granted. But unwittingly,
Hmm.
and in some cases now that the knowledge is there's no excuse. Can't say that we don't know in the 21st century the,
What's going
the
on?
reality of what's happening.
But at the same time, I think this slide really showcases kind of that point is that we have even, venerable magazines like National Geographic that disappear from the newsstand because they get sort of, these journals that we've always relied on for decades and decades to bring us real news, really good fact,
Truth.
the truth, actionable items, that they're kind of getting harder for us to access because they're disappearing from print or they're disappearing in general, along with the, like the staff writers. It's
Mm.
it's it's just it's kind of an untenable situation because people are now hungry for the knowledge, but it's harder to get it into people's hands.
Yeah, and as you said, Sylvia, like the getting the education, and helping people understand what is at stake is that storytelling piece of it, the journalism piece of it is so important.
Hmm.
And we're at this moment when we're really losing publications. In 2019, things began to change for the program that I was working on with National Geographic, me and my colleagues, Oliver Payne and Rachel Bale, who was the animals editor there at the time. They became part of National Geographic became a part of Walt Disney, and the editorial focus began to shift sort of a little bit away from those, in-depth investigations.
Right.
And there were several rounds of layoffs. Disney took National Geographic off the newsstands. All of the publication staff writers and some of the longtime editors were laid off. And then Wildlife Watch was soon discontinued. And that's where Wire came in. That's where we said, you know what, with the end of Wildlife Watch, no other publisher or media company is systematically focusing on wildlife crime journalism.
Hmm.
So we decided to get together and start this nonprofit because there are so many stories to tell, and we
Yeah.
need to tell them. It's more urgent than ever to get the stories out there.
Yeah, time is really of the essence because as we know, we've lost like so many species in just the last 40 years. It's like half of half of global biodiversity. It's just accelerating. And we've got to really, find ways to communicate, effectively to large groups of people so that they can really decide to take action.
Rene, I understand that among mammals, humans, and the animals that we grow for our purposes, the human tribe and our accessories, like cows and pigs and sheep, we dominate. That only 4% of the mammals, the mass of mammals on the planet now, are wild. It's all the elephants and whales and dolphins and squirrels, and it seems breathtaking that we
Yes.
have consumed so much of the natural world. Even our fellow mammals are not safe. You'd think we'd have a greater sense of empathy of those who are most closely related to us in the living world, but it doesn't seem to be holding true.
And you came to that point perfectly on the slide.
Yeah,
This this is, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys about the biodiversity crisis. Wildlife populations have declined by more than 70% in the last
70%.
50 years.
Wow. Ugh.
And wildlife trade is a major reason. So this, with the picture you're looking at, is a night market in Brazzaville, Congo, Republic of Congo, where people are selling, those are dwarf crocodiles, and there's monkeys in there, and bush pig, an assortment of other wild meat. This was taken as part of the story that I worked on with Brent Sturton about the wildlife trade in Africa, the bushmeat trade in Africa. And, it was astonishing to me in reporting this story. I learned so much about African culture and the pride in food. I ran into someone who had a white guy who, from the UK, who had the wrong conception that, like, oh, people just want to fill, they just need to fill their bellies. It's so important just to fill their bellies. What I found traveling with this young gentleman who was taking care of a lot of the arrangements for me, he introduced me to his food culture.
Mm.
And people in this part of the world are extremely proud of their food and their spices and the way they cook and the time they cook. And it just, it's tradition. And so bushmeat, because it's what they know, because it's what's close by, is part of the tradition. But there's an extra step now that's become the biggest problem, and that's this commercial use
Yes.
of bushmeat that's bringing it into urban areas like this in huge volumes. This is not a family cooking for subsistence. This is
No, not at all.
large, and I met people in, next to national parks in the northern part of the Republic of Congo who were sneaking this stuff in big trucks, and I mean, not
The
only
scaling up, right? It's the same as with fisheries. It's one thing for a family to fish along the coast to feed themselves or feed their community, but then suddenly they're taking out 60 metric tons,
There's
and it's
international market.
international markets, and that's where it just goes so sideways so fast. These animals just can't reproduce. The habitat's under attack. It's just a cascading disaster.
Well, just since 1980, our population has doubled.
Wow, it's shocking.
It was 4 million when the World Conservation Strategy was launched by World Wildlife and IUCN. And the intention was aiming in the right direction, but the reality has gone just the other way. We
Mhm.
have scaled up rather than scaling back wildlife trade, certainly on the land, but absolutely in the ocean, as refrigeration has made it possible to take any quantity of any sea creature from anywhere and find a market for it somewhere. It, it's the technology that is working absolutely against maintaining a healthy ocean.
Hmm.
It can't last. The, the numbers have dropped precipitously of the creatures that we take for granted, like tuna, swordfish, sharks. They're on a rapid road to the end if we keep doing what we're doing.
That's
And
very
of course,
true.
it's not only food, it's also, for this picture, sort of symbolizes the aquarium trade. You know,
Hmm.
you've got pet
Nemo.
from aquarium fish to parrots to cheetahs and chimps that you see on Instagram. People keep them as pets. And then there's traditional medicine like seahorses that are ground into powders and tiger bone made into wine, art and cultural items like ivory carvings and rosewood furniture, and rare skins and furs that are used for fashion. Nature's already struggling under the effects of climate change and pollution and land use changes, and the wildlife trade is only exacerbating all of this.
Yeah, and these clownfish are such an interesting one to look at because, there have been efforts to, credibly raise these in captivity to address the pet trade, but still it's infiltrated with ones that are captured from the wild. And I think that same thing happens often with the parrot, parrots as you were talking about.
Well, salmon.
And
People say go catch the wild salmon, don't eat the farmed salmon. But neither is a good choice when you know what underlies both.
it is the dodgy salmon thing. You have no concept of where that little rosy rectangle of protein came from. It's just, was it wild? What species is it? How far did it come?
Just
Any of
don't
the things.
just don't choose it.
Just don't choose it.
Yeah.
Avoid it.
I mean, I've been covering these issues for about 10 years, and I have to say there's one really consistent truth, and that's if there is a legal trade, there's almost always a legal business hiding within that. There are always going to be bad apples. There are always going to be people who want to push the boundaries and try to get more, who are greedy and just want to get richer. And that's the issue. It's so hard to police these legal industries, and we just don't have the capacity to be able to check the DNA of every fish that comes through the supply chain. That's not happening, and I don't think there'll ever be the capacity to do that.
And I think like this slide really kind of shows it, another compounding problem is that there is this ongoing lack of pulling back funding and support for journalists such as yourself, and the way that the news and the truth and the facts are disseminated.
Yeah, alongside this biodiversity crisis, we are having a major crisis in journalism. Decades of plummeting revenue and slash budgets have just eroded newsrooms. And some of the statistics I wrote down from the thinking back to January 23rd, 2024, the entire news business on that day seemed like it was about to collapse, because journalists at Time Magazine and National Geographic were both announcing on that same day that they had been laid off Then you had unionized employees at Condé Nast Publications staging a strike to protest imminent cuts. You had LA Times, the biggest newspaper west of DC, announced that same day that it was cutting more than 20% of its newsroom. And then within a month of that, major layoffs came at NBC, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, BuzzFeed News, Vice, and The Intercept. And the gutting of newsrooms has just continued. And
Hmm.
there's a reason, the reason why is it has to do with plummeting ad revenue, AI bypassing with the summaries, bypassing the website content that so many publishers have spent decades trying to maximize their search engine optimization. Now AI is just skipping it all together, and that's taking eyeballs away from media websites. And then readers' resistance to pay for news that they'd always receive for free. That's all driving this crisis in journalism. And that's denying all of us the information that we need to make informed decisions.
Yeah,
Well, bravo for Wire and what you're doing. We
Thank
really
absolutely.
need you. The world needs
you.
the straight story.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are three things that media outlets now have in short supply. And one of them is experienced journalists, because so many people have been laid off. Another one is finances because, all of these things are really expensive. If you're doing deep investigative stories, you want to put people in the field for a long time. You want to give a reporter the support they need to keep with the story for a year. And then there's like the copy editing and the fact checking and all that stuff, requires a financial input. But the
Mhm.
third thing that I think is this is one of the big reasons why investigative journalism is suffering. It's because a lot of publications are afraid to take risk. They're
Yes.
more and more afraid to be sued. And they don't want to they don't want to take that financial risk. Uh,
Hmm.
so that's a real problem. And that's why Wire's working with partner publications that, I mean, we're insured and we take on the risk, but we also work with partner publications who do real journalism and also have legal departments that, look at stories before they're published and deal with lawsuits if they come.
That's
One of our
good.
one of our main partners early on right now has been the Rolling Stone, and they're fearless. So they've been a really nice partner.
That's excellent. And it is, you do have to kind of wonder, what kinds of, I don't know, kind of economic manipulations are going on to kind of help quash the
truth.
legitimate truth in the news and the facts for,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
short-term gains.
Or
I
the
mean,
merchants of doubt.
Yeah.
So you might hear the straight story and be encouraged to not believe it.
we're in scary territory for US journalism. I mean, journalists for major newspapers having agents, law enforcement agents pounding on their doors, demanding to come inside and, seize their computers and their electronics. I mean, these things have not happened in recent history in the United States. And it's a scary era. It really is a scary time for democracy.
Absolutely.
Hmm. That poor rhino.
The rhino under guard, it's just he's the last of his kind, isn't he?
Yeah, that might be a northern white rhino.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They're working on protecting them. The last couple of I think they're working on putting what is it, a clone, not a clone.
Yeah. No, I know
They're
what you mean, but
they're
they're trying
trying
to
to
with
save just as the same as bringing back the mastodon. They're trying
right.
to
Yeah.
take these last of the species. It'll be interesting to see. But I mean, if you don't have if the demand isn't addressed and if the habitat isn't there to support the animals, then you're just making a zoo if you don't
Right.
address those other things, right?
But you really have to wonder, like, what does it come to where these guys, the local community who really cares and wants to protect these animals has to, go out with this sort of firepower just to try to get through the day and to keep the
Yeah.
animal going
Yeah. It's
on
a
top
very
of everything else.
And the horns are there for a reason. God, poor rhino. He's not really the same. The-
no.
There's the deliberate surgical removal of the horns to protect their lives. But
Yeah,
it's just sad that we go to such extremes.
it really is. Yeah, it is. Yes.
Ah, oh,
Why
yeah, yeah,
Wired been, we've been working to bolster newsrooms and drive accountability, educate the public, and affect policy. Those are all really important things that journalism plays a major role in. And each of our investigations is a blowout feature story. This is the one that I did for Rolling Stone last year. It's these stories, we want them to have a great narrative. So they're a read that you have to get through. You can't put it down. Amazing photography, film, maps, graphics, and social media. Um, and we're working with these major media outlets like Rolling Stone to bring these stories to a big audience. Rolling Stone has 20 million people engaging with their publication and their website, so it reached a lot of people. Um, and we did a short companion for the film for this project too, called The Gray Zone, which is
nice.
also available on YouTube. And so we tried to bring the story in as many formats as possible to as many people as possible. And we felt pretty good about the success of this one. And I'm so excited for our next project, which will be an ocean story.
That's excellent. And these poor birds, I mean, we know how smart they are. I have had the I guess the honor of taking care of some of these birds that have come through rescue,
Mm.
and they're just such incredible animals. And to see that they, to your point, there's these very aggressive captive breeding programs for these to help satisfy the pet trade, and yet the the wild take just is ongoing, and
Mhm.
they just kind of mix it up in ways that are very hard to trace. And your work here to really kind of help get the facts out is just invaluable.
One of the really fun things that happened with this story is, the attention that the animals get online is a major influence on, people wanting more of these birds. And one bird, just one of these birds can sell for up to $6,000. So that really can fuel poaching. One of the couples who has a bird named Gizmo, who has a very, very popular presence on social media. He's has more than 3 million viewers. They read the story and realized that they were part of the problem, and they wanted to do something about it. So they've actually started a new project called Squawk Global, and they are educating people about what it's like to really have a parrot as a pet,
Oh
and
yeah,
really, and
a
then
lot of
they
work.
a lot of language has gone out about, adopt, don't shop. And their Gizmo is an adopted parrot. And the reason why they decided to continue on with his webs or with his social media is because, he brings a lot of joy to people. They've even heard from people who've talked about, he saved them from, harming themselves. He really brings them a lot of joy. So they decided to stick with having a channel for him, but they're countering that with a lot of messaging about where adopting animals instead of buying them, and also what's involved with having one of these guys as a pet, as you
Oh
experience.
yeah, it,
They're
it it's a
a
tremendous
lot.
amount of work. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're depriving these amazing creatures their real life.
Hmm.
It may suit our fancy, and it is optional on our part. But to get to really know a gray parrot, you should go where they live
Right.
and celebrate who they are in their own place.
Well,
Really get to know them as the wild creatures, the smart wild creatures they are, instead of forcing them into a conformed human narrow space.
It's true.
It's really a disservice to them.
But there's so much good that can come from, protecting animals where they are. And then you have the whole economic model of verifiable um, sustainable tourism.
Yeah, well, bird watching is
Bird watching is
big
huge
deal.
business. It's just,
Join the bird watchers of the world and
but having
turn your yard into bird friendly.
but having the capacity to go to where those animals live and spend time there and actually go out and see them in the environment, bring that money into the
Yeah.
community and incentivize their ongoing survival is really, I think, a much better path than trying to keep one in captivity because
It's more fun too.
it is more fun. It's a
Well,
lot
what
of,
is this bird? I
it's
should
like a
know.
hornbill, isn't it?
Is
Yeah,
it?
it is. It's a
Yeah.
hornbill. And these birds
Or
they're poached for their casque, and it's also, similar for as ivory. It's a different type of ivory. But yeah, to your point about traveling to see them in the wild, it is something that people can do, support the local economy and see wildlife in its natural state. Unfortunately, with the parrots, the poaching has become so bad that their range has just retracted to this tiny little area, really. I mean, previously it was most of Africa, and now the concentration of where they're still found is mostly in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is not a place where a lot of tourists go. And like
Right.
right now there's an Ebola outbreak and there's been a lot of civil unrest there. It's not a place that a lot of tourists can
In
even
access.
in better times can access.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
well,
it's important to see them, before it gets to that point, right?
And
Like
it,
support.
yeah, honestly, and just your comments there, it takes me back to looking at your list of focus areas and the animal-borne disease and the crossover to humans, particularly looking back at sort of the very large bushmeat market in a very urban area. It really kind of makes you wonder about some of the of those overlaps and disease outbreaks of different kinds when you bring these stressed animals of multiple species into that kind of environment.
Yeah, I have a slide to show you and a
Is it
couple
is it
slides
here?
now.
Okay.
Well, this one I wanted to tell you about
Yeah,
the aquarium trade because the pet trade for the aquarium fish and corals, that's not
crazy.
only endangering wildlife, but it's raising ethical and animal welfare concerns. You've alluded to this too, Sylvia. This trade is associated with 90% mortality.
Hmm.
Nearly 3,000 saltwater species, including fish and invertebrates, are displayed in tanks or they're captured from the wild, predominantly in Indonesia and the Philippines, where harmful chemicals such as cyanide are sometimes used for capturing aquarium fish.
but
And nobody knows how many marine animals are sold on the black market. That's an additional source of animals coming into the aquarium trade. But some experts estimate that it's 10 to 30% of marine animals in stores have been caught illegally with cyanide.
Wow.
there's great business, and some are definitely profiting from raising things like the Nemo fish, the little clownfish, for the aquarium trade,
Mhm.
and reducing or eventually, the sooner the better, eliminating the extraction from the wild because it's a true problem. Many of these fish, like those two little fish, they can be 25 years old.
Hmm.
Is that
And
amazing?
people think of them as, I don't know what, ornaments.
Yeah, little living ornaments.
And I think there's much good coming out of aquariums, the big public aquariums, as well as the home aquaria, learning about these creatures and the whole art of maintaining corals and perpetuating them has largely come from the aquarium side of things, both, again, the public aquariums and the private ones. But we just have to get our heads straight and understand we need to protect the wild systems. And to the extent that there's a place, whether it's in zoos or aquariums, we have to do a better job of understanding the impact of taking from what remains of the natural wild areas. Um, it's just having the right ethic and understanding that we have to respect what remains of the fabric of life that we didn't put it there. We know how to destroy it. We've got to do a much better job of understanding the importance of keeping it safe.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Yeah, this is one of the items seized by Europol. It's, they get all kinds of things like this. We recently, when my colleague Rachel recently went to the repository in Colorado, where it's this enormous warehouse where they have everything that's been seized in at the airports in the US or in home seizures, just a warehouse shop of horrors, the unbelievable things that people try to bring in, and that have value, high
Mhm.
value, um, something such as this
Shark
jaw.
journal.
Yeah. This is the one that I was telling you about. So this is a example of, the connection between zoonotic disease and humans. So
Hmm.
3/4 of all emerging zoonotic diseases or infectious diseases are zoonotic. And we're talking about coronavirus, avian influenza, monkeypox, and Ebola. And this man at a market in Brownsville is preparing a fresh bat for a
Oh,
customer. And I watched him take this from the cage. It was a live bat. He took it from the cage, he smacked it on the concrete to kill it, and then he deboned the bat for his client, just the way a fishmonger might fillet a fish for his client. He deboned it with his teeth.
oh dear Lord.
And someone with this type of exposure could easily become patient zero the next time a wildlife disease spills over into humans. So this is a really important thing that, needs to be addressed, and we need to remember too that infectious diseases, like, are not just, it's not an over there issue. It's not,
No,
this is not just something that happens in another place. We've already experienced, and it seems like a lot of people have already forgotten that COVID came to the United States, and it's also, coronavirus is also associated with bats. So it's something that we all need to care about, and I think the gutting of the support for the World Health Organization and the aid programs that can help people address these diseases when there is an outbreak is threatening all of us.
100%. And as the scale of extraction increases, you see here these poor fish, again, they're just considered as pounds of protein, right?
Well, it's just looked at as normal. People get accustomed to seeing pictures like this, but if you had cats or dogs or even chickens piled up like this, people would be disturbed. They speak out, but when it's fish, we've normalized scenes like that. And we have
Yeah.
to get over the normalization of such atrocities.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that slide and this one too was, even though that was not a very happy picture, I wanted to, happily say that Wire is now launching a series of ocean investigations. And these last few months, I've been doing sort of a listening tour with leaders in the ocean conservation community, including ocean elders, to find out what they believe, including you, Sylvia, are the most pressing issues threatening ecosystems, marine ecosystems, and the planet we live in. And the first of these investigations will be launching this summer with some
Excellent.
generous support from foundations and individuals. And while I can't offer specifics about that investigation, I can say that we're exploring a range of story ideas, examining how corruption and political power and organized crime are fueling illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and
Right.
other forms of marine exploitation. We're looking at the global push toward deep sea mining and environmentally destructive seafood aquaculture, um, Chinese
And
medicine, and a lot of,
all of these are climate issues.
you're
We've
right.
disrupted the passage of, well, planetary chemistry, whether it's carbon or all the other elements through the shifts that we are driving.
You're right. They are all climate
Krill and
related.
squid and tuna, shrimp, you name it.
And how much do you rely on like tips from public to decide what stories you're going to chase up?
Yeah, if your listeners out there have story ideas or sources you think we should connect with, or, thoughts on support for independent journalism, I would love to hear from them. They can email me at my email address is there on the screen. Happy to hear from them anytime. And yeah, and support independent journalism. It's not, there's no billionaires, there's no advertising. This is right up there with one of the most important things you can do is supporting journalism.
All right, we've got a few questions in the queue, so we're gonna pop through them here as quickly as we can. So Caroline is asking, has poaching for rhino tusks and elephant tusks or bushmeat in any areas of Africa actually decreased over the last 10 to 20 years as a result of reporting?
Yeah, there have been some gains in reducing poaching, and it's, in particular areas, and it has a lot to do with better enforcement, really, by, helping to get the local community invested in protecting the species rather than poaching it. And that's such a common theme. When people are invested, when conservation measures to protect wildlife and provide livelihoods for people, when they're involved in that conservation equation, most people will choose the thing that, causes or that brings good to the world.
Yes. Yes, I think most people are good at heart.
Yeah,
And if they have alternative ways to feed their family that doesn't involve killing the wildlife, then they will do it,
right,
you know.
right. It's
And
true.
Judy is asking, can you comment on honeybee hive thefts?
Oh, hive thefts. Yes. Years ago, I did a story on people were stealing bees in California in the almond orchards because we have to pollinate those almond trees. We have to truck bees all the way to California to pollinate the majority of the almonds that are sold anywhere. And what happens is those pollination services are very, very valuable. So beekeepers bring all of their hives to California during almond season, and sometimes, and it often has to be a beekeeper, right? Because not just anyone would steal bees, but sometimes they get stolen in large numbers, and then they chop up the boxes and they resell the bees. And yeah, it's just another form of surprising wildlife crime. Who would have thought? Bees, right?
It's really crazy. And Michael is asking about the permits that the state of Florida issues for the captures of fish that are sent to aquariums across the world. And they think that Florida legislature is looking at stopping it. But do you know, I mean, is that kind of common in the US? Different states have permits that they issue for capture of animals?
Yeah, I think that's very common. I'm not familiar with Florida's permitting, but I think, issuing permits for what's considered to be sustainable take is pretty common.
Yeah.
The thing is, there is no such thing in the 21st century. We've already taken so much. We don't have original levels that once did exist. I mean, 10,000 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
But we're so good in recent decades at finding, capturing, and marketing that hope of continuing a sustained take at almost any level, unless it's zero. We have to give nature a break. We have to make choices other than eating wildlife or consuming wildlife in whatever form, like the krill from Antarctica. We don't eat the krill, but we pop the little pills that come from squeezing the oil out of
The
the krill in the cosmetic industry that uses krill oil for various cosmetics. There are alternatives, including growing the algae that form the oil that is valued anyway, the omega oils that are used in cosmetics and those pills that people sometimes take. There's no need to kill the krill, except the way they're mostly used now is to feed salmon
Mhm.
in the northern hemisphere and really subsidizing fleets to go all the way to the other end of the world to capture food for salmon that probably should not be raised at all.
hmm
And it's one of those, the fact that the krill are being used to feed the salmon, like it's people have a lot of people have heard the story about, the effluent from the salmon pens that contaminates the coastal areas, or the sea lice, or all of these other things that are associated with salmon farming. But I feel like that piece of the story, like the volume of fish that it takes to feed one salmon, is still not a
Yeah,
story that a lot of people have
not a
heard.
good business model.
No, no, you never follow it with, I don't know, chickens or most anything else. Um, let's see. The one's a statement. Let's see. Uh, Sharon is saying that people can't always afford to travel to natural destinations. It's great that zoos and aquariums can be a substitute. So I think that's kind of a good closer too, that, it is true that we really need journalists and others out there to kind of help take us there virtually in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that zoos are often an entry point, or aquariums, and there are some great ones like the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It takes you right up to the edge of the coast there, and you can see the kelp forest, and they are involved in conservation and animal rehabilitation and other things. Um, I think that having the opportunity to be exposed to wildlife in a captive environment can be a very good thing, if that captive environment is doing good work, good conservation work. So yeah, I mean, I personally might not have even ended up in the career I'm in now if I hadn't had the opportunity to see some spectacular animals in the zoo or in the aquarium.
Mhm.
Um, so I hope that people who have that access end up being inspired.
It's a
Yeah,
great starting place for kids,
it's
but
true.
really people of any s- stage of life. And if you rewild your own property or your city or your county or your state, if you get behind projects like the Path of the Panther, creating wildlife friendly areas, you don't have to travel the ends of the earth. It can be right there by your
Yeah,
window. If
yeah,
you,
it's true.
it's a win-win for you, for the birds, for the other creatures, and for the state of the planet. We have taken so much that planetary boundaries are really at risk right now. It's not just climate, although that's a big one. It's the water cycle. It's the diversity of life that makes Earth hold a steady course, that we have consumed so much so fast. We need to wake up in the 21st century. We didn't know before we had an excuse, but there's no excuse now. This is the best chance we'll ever have. So we should celebrate and
Yeah,
certainly support what you're doing.
yes. And
You're a voice for nature.
the voice for nature. And I guess the last little question we have time for, Maggie is just asking, how can we keep an active conversation going about creating alternative income sources for local communities? And I think it really does come down to, what can we all do to help with local community capacity building, so that people do have alternatives to extractive industries, to, bushmeat, to fishing, or whatever it is that has gone from a very local, traditional thing to something that's completely unsustainable. But how do we
Yeah.
bring new jobs, for economic prosperity that is nature positive?
And I think so much, I'll give another plug for journalism because so much of it comes back to if you don't know, if the public doesn't know that the problem exists or that there are people in need or that there are people who are trying to, find a solution or that there are people who are taking advantage. I'm sorry. Don't. Um, if they don't know if there is no journalism to shine a light on that, then it won't get out there. We won't be able to support those things. So I think it's really important to tell their stories.
With knowing comes caring, right?
Mm.
Yes, exactly.
We are slightly past the top of the hour, but before we close, Sylvia and I would just like to say
Thank
thank you, Renee,
Thank
and to the
you.
Ocean Elders and to the diving community who keeps coming back and enjoying these conversations with us. We are so grateful to all of you, and water connects us all. Um, Remain curious, spend time in nature, and we're going to be back actually later this week on Friday, believe it or not. And until then, take care of the ocean
as if your life depends on it,
because
because it
it
does.
does. It does. Thanks, everyone. Thank you again, Renee.
Thank you.
Bye for
Take care.
now.
All right. Goodbye.